clever pun.
Hello and welcome to the Kongversation. I'm Hyle Russell.
And I am Malik.
Malik! Once again, Once again, on another live episode of the Kongversation here on our Twitch channel. We are live on our Twitch channel. I don't know how else.
You already pulled out my live.
That's
fine.
Yeah, peaked. It's over. This is a bit weird for me, Malik, because I'm often asked, how the hell do you do a Donkey Kong podcast every week? I mean, it's a bit of a misnomer. It averages out to almost an episode a week, but of course we don't do consecutive week after week. We do take some time off here or there, front loaded at the beginning of the year. But people ask me, don't you run out of stuff to say? And that's, I generally, when I'm asked with that, I would just ask that question on Blue Sky earlier today. I was like, how does a Donkey Kong podcast have anything to talk about? And I could really confound people by saying, well, it's not just Donkey Kong, because there's Banjo-Kazooie, there's Conker, and then they would ask, how the hell does that matter? When's the last time we've had a Banjo-Kazooie game? When's the last time we've had a Conker game? And I'm like, well, there's also Grab by the Ghoulies, and it's Mr. Pants, and I basically just dig myself into a hole going down this route of defending the core tenets of the DKU. But the thing is, I can always find something to talk about when it comes to Donkey Kong itself. There is a wealth of topics where 12 years into this podcast, I feel like we are just getting started. That being said, there's only so many permutations of anniversaries and revisiting games in as a total concept. We're broadly talking about Donkey Kong Country today. It was we've broadly talked about Donkey Kong Country quite a bit here on the Kongversation. So how much more can I really say? And that's a fair point. And I wasn't really sure, because I wanted to do something. 30 years of the original Donkey Kong Country. It's a huge milestone for this game, for this series, for our fandom, for our community. So it had to be celebrated. It had to be, put up on a pedestal. But the thing is, we just did 40 years of Donkey Kong a few years ago, and I didn't want to just go through the same beats, the same jungle beats, if you will. I was
going to say that.
Yeah. So it's we have to acknowledge it. We have to celebrate it. But what do we really do to fill the episode? How is it a thing? I can break down Donkey Kong Country quite a bit. On this episode, we're talking about this specific world or this specific character, or on the very next episode of the Kongversation, Dustin and I will be talking about the Donkey Kong Country instruction manual, Malik. So,
ooh.
Yeah, I know. So, I mean, that's no problem, but just broad strokes. What do I do for the 30th anniversary of Donkey Kong Country? And the truth is, I don't really have much of a plan. I wanted to do a live stream. I reached out to you, and you were keen to appear on this. So we're really just going to take stock. We're going to swap stories. We're going to talk with people who join us in a live stream as we go. We are going to really just sit back and have a leisurely remembrance of all things Donkey Kong Country. This isn't a grand statement. This isn't a grand unifying thesis on why Donkey Kong Country matters, or why Donkey Kong Country took the world by storm 30 years ago. This is just really going to be two Donkey Kong Country fans chatting about Donkey Kong Country, because it was 30 years ago today, November 21st, 1994, that Donkey Kong Country first came to the West. Well, first came to the Americas, I should say. It did come out in the UK on November 18th. But that's really, like, I understand on social media and everything, like, everybody has to be first, right? Like, oh, this is the earliest we can say this is this game's anniversary, so let's all jump in now to do it. But from a marketing standpoint, everything was very geared towards Nintendo of America in those days. Like, I don't want to sell Nintendo of Europe short. I don't want to sell any other territory short. But a large percentage of, like, Nintendo's philosophy was between Japan and between the US and Canada, right? So
Yeah.
November 21st really became, like, the clarion call for when this game came out, and, you know, from the advertisements to everything else. So it's the date I associate most with Donkey Kong Country's anniversary, but it is just the anniversary week in general for Donkey Kong Country, and that's fine too.
Yeah, but I see some people have, like, when it's their birthday, they do, like, birthday weeks.
Yeah.
But I think for Donkey Kong Country, I think it fits. I think it deserves that. Where you can have a birthday week. You're very, very special.
It blew me away, Malik, because this week Nintendo of America acknowledged Donkey Kong Country's 30th anniversary. And why this is a big deal is because Nintendo never acknowledges any of Donkey Kong's anniversaries.
Ever on any platform.
On any platform, except this week, they finally did it. And I guess this will tie into, if we have any grand point to make during this episode, I suspect we will tie back around to this towards the end. But I just wanted to share with you this post. It was first posted on Instagram, and
really?
Yeah. And I don't go on Instagram. But
me neither.
It was a photo, and there's a later animated version of this posted on other social media platforms. Unofficially on Blue Sky, because Nintendo isn't on Blue Sky yet. Which, come on, Nintendo, come on. But
yeah, come on now.
They had the original Donkey Kong Country box on this, like, wooden table or something in a bunch of trees that it looks like a jungly setting with banana bunches side by side. Banana bunches they clearly just bought from the grocery store because they're still a little green in them. These aren't the bananas that you buy and you think you're going to eat, and then they sit around for a few days and you're like, oh, I guess I have to throw these out. But
yeah.
They wrote, the Donkey Kong Country series began 30 years ago this month. From madcap minecart levels to befriending animal buddies, what are your favorite memories of DK's platforming adventures? Which, first of all, they said animal buddies, Malik, which I brought this up on social media, but that is a huge validation for our community, because this isn't maybe universal, but I think by and large, the nomenclature that the Donkey Kong fan community refers to the animal friends as is animal buddies. And that was a term that was used for Donkey Kong Country 2's character parade, the cast credits at the end of the game, or close to the end of the game when you first beat Captain K. Rool. But it was kind of glommed onto by the community, like, okay, like, that's what we're going to call them. That's the official term. And now Nintendo of America didn't make this a proper noun like they should have, animal buddies, and capital letters, A, B, but it's still really cool to see it. It clearly shows, I think, that Nintendo is more attuned with the Donkey Kong fandom than they ever have been since the height of Donkey Kong Country Mania, which we'll define as 1994 to 1996. Basically, the launch of Donkey Kong Country to the arrival of the Nintendo 64, which kind of then ate up Nintendo's focus and the focus of the mainstream. But it's been really cool to see these last few years kind of the ultimate validation and victory of Donkey Kong Country. the game, because this
Mm-hmm.
game has been on a roller coaster, apropos enough, considering, because of course it was a cultural sensation when it came out in 1994. It's game of the year, without a doubt. It really breathed more life into the Super NES, right? Like it basically made next-gen consoles a little bit irrelevant for a longer stretch of time, because it was like, oh, you don't really need to upgrade because your Super Nintendo can do this.
Yeah. No, you don't need Sega or CD-ROM or 32X. We got it right here, baby. No Super FX chip.
No Super FX chip needed. And of course, then, from there, as all things that are white hot like run into, this always kind of is a pratfall of the like runaway success of something, is you have the backlash, the fall afterwards. And Donkey Kong Country went through a pretty long, significant stretch of time, maybe longer than most things go through this, considering the circumstances, which we'll get into. But it went through this reappraisal where it was like, oh, actually, that game is not that good at all. Oh, actually, it's just a stinking heap of trash. Actually, if you like that game, you're a dum-dum, and you should feel bad about yourself and your life choices. And it took a long time to dig out of that hole. And honestly, like, we weren't there yet on the 20th anniversary of Donkey Kong Country. We were still far away from like reclaiming the crown in 2014, which is wild to say, considering that a new Donkey Kong Country game actually came out towards the beginning of that year. But it took a couple more years for Donkey Kong Country, I think, to really be reappraised, and everybody to just kind of unclench and say, no, yeah, that's a classic.
Yeah.
Shut up.
Everybody calm yourself, please.
Everybody calm yourself, please.
Calm yourself. Okay.
Hello to March Rose in the chat and says, happy 30th anniversary, DK. We got Me Muppet celebrating with the It's Mr. Pants dance, our favorite emote in the DK Vine Twitch server. We are live streaming this by
text that says pants dance, pants dance.
Yeah, I guess the emotes aren't working on Twitch right now, but my point being, we are live streaming this on twitch.tv/DKVine right now, as we do occasional episodes of The Kongversation. We do live stream most episodes of The Kongversation for our $5 and up patrons, rain or shine, but for these special occasions, like Talk Like a Pirate Day and DK Vine's 25th anniversary, we do these live episodes. But also, hello to everybody listening to this after the fact, which will be most people. We are live streaming this in the middle of a work day. I understand most people can't, pry themselves away from their desk jobs or out in the field. I don't know,
the mines,
plowing the fields and like working the gas pumps. I don't know what people do for jobs, but they can't just listen to a live audio Twitch stream of two people talking about Donkey Kong Country in the middle of the afternoon in the Americas, and that's fine.
They're just not trying hard enough, but okay.
I welcome all of our posthumous listeners after the live stream ended. You're part of this too. Welcome. No matter what point in time you're hearing this, I think we all just need to chill out and we just need to talk about Donkey Kong Country. And that's what this episode is. It's a hangout, Malik. That's, we're just kicking our shoes off, putting our feet up on the table, maybe putting on Donkey Kong's giant, oversized, crusty socks that are just drooped over his bed. And we're talking about a game that's 30 years old today. Malik, you're kind of a baby compared to me.
Yes, in many, many ways. But
Well, I don't know how many ways would be applicable. I'd just say you're a bit younger than I am. So
okay.
I know you came to Donkey Kong Country a little bit later than like that initial burst of mania.
Yeah, so if I may tell the whole story of
Please
how
do.
I got into Donkey Kong Country,
Please do.
but yeah. So let's see, where was I? So let's see. I'm like 1 year younger than Donkey Kong Countries, but I was like kind of behind the times when it comes to like video games and everything, but I did have a Super Nintendo in the household. It was for other people in the house, so it wasn't mine. It was just when I woke up one day, it was just there. And Donkey Kong Country was also there. And I will say, like, the Super Nintendo was the only console I had up until like 2002. And I didn't know about the other Donkey Kong Countries until, yeah, like the mid 2000s. But yeah, Donkey Kong Country was just one of the games that we just had in the house. And definitely one of the first games I ever played. And like you were talking about all the backlash of Donkey Kong Country that came like years and years later. I didn't know about any of that stuff until maybe until Returns came out. But yeah, we'll talk about all that stuff later. But Donkey Kong Country, one of the very first games I ever played. I don't have my original copy, but I still do have the original instruction manual that came with it. And yeah, it just sits on my shelf, and it's just it means a lot to me, even though I do think that it's not the best game in the series, not even in the original trilogy. I would still say that it is my favorite of the original trilogy, even though I fully recognize DKC2 and DKC3 do a lot more and have a lot more going for them.
No, I applaud that level of shades of gray you got going on, because that's smart. That's intellectual thinking there, Malik. It's not just thinking in binary terms where a lot of people are like, well, this is my favorite, so therefore it is the best. I think you can and should weigh different things when like assessing a work of art. Like for example, Donkey Kong Country 2 is my favorite, and I think it's the best. And honestly, Donkey Kong Country, the original, compared to the original 3 DKC games, it's honestly my least favorite of the 3. But I think it does some things far better than the second 2 do. I think the tone, the atmosphere, the general vibes of Donkey Kong Country are wholly unique, and I think the series slowly abandoned them with DKC 2 and never found its way back. And it's kind of a shame, because I really like just the general atmosphere and emotions that the original Donkey Kong Country conjures up. And it's not as cartoony as later Donkey Kong Adventures would be. And I don't even think Donkey Kong Country 2 is that cartoony. Even Donkey Kong Country 3 with the bears and the banana birds and what have you, it's still not as cartoony as things would get with like Donkey Kong 64, which by the way turns 25 tomorrow. We'll be talking about Donkey Kong 64 a couple episodes down the line. I haven't forgotten about Donkey Kong 64, everyone. It just, there's only so many anniversaries you can cover in a short amount of time, and Donkey Kong 64 will always be like overshadowed a little bit by Donkey Kong Country because they're separated by 5 years, and so 5 years, 1 day apart. So it's just, yeah, like what's a bigger deal, Donkey Kong 64's 25th or the 30th anniversary of everything? Sorry, Donkey Kong 64. We'll talk about you in a couple episodes, though. Chris has joined us in the live stream, says happy 30th birthday, DKC. I'm hoping this episode will finally settle whether Donkey Kong is the big one or the hat one. I thought you were going to say we'll finally settle whether Donkey Kong is the adult Donkey Kong Jr. or some missing generation's progeny. It's always weird when people say that for me, it's weird when people say this Donkey Kong is Donkey Kong Jr.'s son, because I feel like that argument is had because they look at the way like Cranky Kong is usually portrayed compared to this Donkey Kong. Oh, he's his grandfather, even though it's established he raised him in this game. And then that's more embraced as a direct father-son relationship in things like Donkey Kong 64 or the Super Mario Brothers movie. But I don't know. It's just weird because I feel like a lot of these arguments stem from not wanting to cannibalize the notion of Donkey Kong Jr. with this character. Like, oh, if you grow up Donkey Kong Jr. into this tie-wearing adult, then we lose Donkey Kong Jr. as a character. I'm like, well, either way, you're going to lose him. Because if that character is this character's father, then he's even older. I mean, it's... I understand in, like, Mario... like multiplayer games, you can always throw in a baby Mario or whatever, and whatever, nobody cares. They're effectively separate characters. They're just, you know, different skins effectively. But either way, Donkey Kong Jr., you're gonna lose him, right? So it's just this thing that Nintendo just has sidestepped completely. Whenever they want to invoke Donkey Kong Jr., they have to bring him back in some sort of retro context, like in Mario Kart Tour when they just brought back his sprite from Super Mario Kart. And it's like, oh, look how retro and quirky this is. Don't think about it. Don't think about it.
Yeah, we're not going to make a 3D model of this. Look how cool he is in a sprite form, yeah.
So for me, it's just like, if you like Donkey Kong Jr., as I like Donkey Kong Jr., like before I played Donkey Kong Country, I played Donkey Kong Classics on the NES, and it was just... Donkey Kong Jr. was, oh, I got to play as the gorilla. That's so cool. Oh, you know, like the human Mario is the villain. Hell yeah, that seems right. And I like Donkey Kong Jr. When I rented Super Mario Kart, I would always play as Donkey Kong Jr. But for me, like, I like Donkey Kong Jr. and I like the idea that he grows into this. Personally speaking, I understand not everybody's going to have this philosophy, and I'm not trying to say you're wrong if you don't agree. It's just, I do remember like being part of that like Gen 1 Donkey Kong Country fandom, using a little Pokemon parlance to, you know, talk to the Nintendo fans out there. But as part of this like day one DKC fandom, and again, I'm not gatekeeping. I'm not saying like you are lesser of a fan if you came in later, because I understand as things age, more people are going to come into it later than not, and that's great. If you're a Donkey Kong Country baby who just got into the series this week, welcome, have a seat. You know, enjoy our fruit platter. But I remember like me and all my friends on the playground, right? We all thought this was just Donkey Kong Jr. Like the unspoken implication was, oh yeah, this is Donkey Kong Jr. because that makes sense. Otherwise, where is Donkey Kong Jr.? So it's weird.
Dead.
Yeah, he could be dead. I mean, yeah, that's bleak too. But that idea, I think, was like more widespread in the 90s, and then maybe post buyout, post like deeper integration in the Mario cast for all the various Mario sports games and Mario Party. Maybe that like confused the issue a little bit, and so you have a wider range of opinions now. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents, my 2 banana coins on the subject.
Yeah, same here.
Because, like, the thing is, right, Donkey Kong Country, beyond just those initial commercials, because that's where I first heard about Donkey Kong Country, was the commercials that started airing, I think, early November 1994. And it just, like, captured your attention. You're like, what is this? This shot of, like, Earth getting bigger and bigger, and then, like, stampedes of animals, and you had, like, this like jungle tribal beat, and you're like, what? And then...
yeah.
You have like this video footage of this game with this gorilla, and it's just it's a Donkey Kong game. Nintendo's remembered Donkey Kong. I barely knew Donkey Kong, right? My introduction to Donkey Kong was seeing Donkey Kong Classics and KB Toys, and seeing Mario on the cover and being like, that's a Mario game? And like it was on sale, so we got it, and that was I didn't know this was Mario's debut. I didn't know this was like Miyamoto's breakout game. I didn't know any of the history of Donkey Kong in the arcades or any of that. I didn't know Donkey Kong 3 existed because it wasn't part of that compilation. But like I felt like I had this like insider knowledge that my peers of similar age didn't, because we didn't know who Donkey Kong was. And so like I introduced some of my friends to Donkey Kong classics, and I mean it was a pretty quaint game for the early 90s. Like it wasn't that captivating, but we still played through it. And I'm not trying to disrespect the original Donkey Kong either, or Donkey Kong Jr. It's just compared to things like Super Mario World, it's
it just blows it out of the water.
Right,
yeah,
right.
Small potatoes.
Right. So I was like, whoa, they're bringing back Donkey Kong. And this was like a couple months after Donkey Kong for the Game Boy, but that still felt like, I don't know, a throwback, where this felt like a step forward. And so I was just like, this looks amazing. And beyond being pissed off that there was this character named Diddy Kong in it, I was like, where's Donkey Kong Jr.? Where's Donkey Kong Jr.? My favorite character of all time. I was pissed off by their introduction. I was like, how dare they? Why did they just forget about Donkey Kong Jr.? What? That's why I always... sense. Between that and me being disappointed when they announced Banjo-Kazooie, because I wanted the Donkey Kong game on the N64 announced ASAP, those are my two go-to examples for not judging a book by its cover and waiting to see how you actually feel about it, because, of course, both Diddy Kong and Banjo-Kazooie became foundational pillars of my life. So... Yeah. Anyway, game came out, rented it that first weekend, maybe. And, it must have been that first weekend. Yeah. And I've told the story before, but driving home from Blockbuster Video, reading the instruction manual, getting introduced to Cranky Kong, and then learning he was the original Donkey Kong. That sold the game to me, like, immediately, because I had never seen anything like that in a Nintendo game. That acknowledgement of time passing and just how like cheeky it was, but also it just immediately made me more invested in this old man character who you'd run into in the game. And then, of course, in my mind, the implication that this Donkey Kong was his son, was a grown-up Donkey Kong Jr. It just endeared them to me immediately in a way that if this was just Donkey Kong and we were introduced to his grandfather, I don't think it would have played the same.
I don't think so either. And I sort of had that a similar effect, but not because I didn't know about the classic Donkey Kong games growing up, but I remember reading the instruction manual and it just said Cranky Kong was the original Donkey Kong who fought Mario, and I was like, fought Mario? What? Like Super Mario World Mario? Like that Mario? What? Like, I didn't understand, like, Cranky's Cabin theme was just a remix of the original Donkey Kong 1981 theme. I just thought, this guy fought Mario. But why is he fighting Mario? That's awesome. Who is this guy?
I think Donkey Kong Country is the first time I'd ever been exposed to this idea of a soft reboot, where it's effectively a new start for the series, but it still incorporates a lot of the history. Like Donkey Kong Country, of course, it acknowledges that the arcade games happened, but then kind of does its own thing. Like, it establishes Donkey Kong Island as a location and sort of retcons a lot of the Kong history. It kind of realigns the Kong history. It and Donkey Kong Land both did this, but it realigned the Kong history from a Kong perspective rather than having it be so central to Mario's story. And like, I remember thinking how cool it was that history was there, though. Even though this was a fresh start, even though this was kind of the ground floor of something else. And it really did I think, instill in me this idea that, no, history is good. Don't just reboot something and chuck it away because it's easier to sell. Like, even as somebody who didn't have that full knowledge of history for Donkey Kong, it made me want to learn more. It excited me that it was there. And of course, I'm wired that way. You know, I understand not everybody will care as much, but yeah, I thought that was just the coolest thing, right? Like, oh, they've aged the original characters. And it really did help also set it apart from Mario, because it felt like, and of course later games would just ignore this, but it felt like there was just this out of time sequence jump between this and the Mario franchise then, because, well, how could they coexist? if these characters have aged so significantly and Mario is still in the dewy splendor of his youth, doesn't work.
I mean, I always just chalk that up to that gorillas age differently than fictional humans, but yeah.
I just chalk it up now that Mario dyes his hair. He moisturizes pretty regularly. He's got the whole Paul Rudd thing going. So he's, you know, he's looking pretty good for a 75-year-old man.
Yeah. I mean, a 75-year-old gorilla, that's pretty good too, actually.
That's great.
I don't think that's happened yet.
Yeah, of course, you know, gorillas also can't speak English or whatever language they speak. So I think you can assume...
There are grandfather gorillas, though.
There are. I think you can assume, though, that the Kongs have some biological differences to just your regular gorillas and monkeys, where they might have something more aligned with a human lifespan, just the way they've evolved in isolation on Donkey Kong Island and the archipelago. But yeah, like everything about Donkey Kong Country, and I talk about this quite a bit, but it felt like Donkey Kong Country to me was something very personal. Yes, it was this huge moment for Nintendo and for video games when it came out, but it felt like, for me, this was everything I'd ever wanted from a video game. Everything that I had dreamed that a video game could and should be, I was finally getting with this game. Because before Donkey Kong Country, I've talked about, I was a Mario kid. I grew up playing the Super Mario Brothers games. Or I was growing up playing the Super Mario Brothers game. I wasn't fully grown yet. But those were like my go-to comfort games. And then, of course, as I got a little bit older, I got into the whole fighting game craze of the early 90s. I played Street Fighter 2. I played Mortal Kombat when the adults weren't looking. You know, those games appealed to me because they were primarily about ninjas in colorful costumes kicking each other. That was very big in the early 90s. So... but that being said, like, nothing really scratched the itch that needed to be scratched until Donkey Kong Country came out. And Donkey Kong Country also signaled a shift for Nintendo, at least Nintendo in the West. The way they marketed themselves, the way they just carried their demeanor. The Play It Loud era, which we sort of lionize at DK Vine, and we're one of the few who are willing to do that. Most people make fun of the Play It Loud era as this weird, archaic relic of the mid-90s. Better left in the dustbin, because look how, dumb that looks. Look, how, edgy and extreme it's trying to be. But from 1994, again, around Donkey Kong Country's launch, to the arrival of the N64 in September of 1996, Nintendo was really defined in the West by this Play It Loud era, by Donkey Kong Country. And it sort of marked this evolution from Nintendo's identity in the 1980s and early 1990s, the way they introduced themselves to the Americas and Europe and South America and Australia and New Zealand, like the rest of the world outside of Japan. Nintendo was, I think, viewed very much as it was obviously the next step in home video games, right? Like after the video game collapse of the early 80s with Atari and then here came Nintendo with this more polished, refined machine, but it was still very much this like kitschy kid stuff. I think it was viewed like a toy by the mainstream media, if you will. And I think the Play It Loud era was really Nintendo trying to adopt and evolve with an aging audience and say, like, we can come with you as you age, right? Like, it was Nintendo reorienting their marketing from a kid perspective to a more teenage perspective. And this was obviously also in response to the absolute thumping they received from Sega in the early 1990s, where Sega was the cool product. Sega was edgy. Sega was the 90s alternative, like the slick black Genesis, with like compared to the chunky gray Super Nintendo.
With purple tinges of purple on the power and reset buttons.
Yeah, the Good and Plenty colored buttons. The Good and Plenty's just a terrible candy, Malik. I don't know if you have that in Canada.
I don't think we do, and I don't think we want it.
No. Always go for the Mike and Ike's over the Good and Plenty. But it really was like rough if you were a Nintendo kid, because these console wars, these fandom wars, like I am a blanket. We still see this today, bizarrely enough, but it mostly stems from if you are a kid growing up, unless you are in an absurdly rich family, you are lucky to have a video game console. And pretty much you're going to get one or the other. And so you've got to go all in on that system, right? So if your parents get you a Super Nintendo, you're a Nintendo kid. If your parents got you a Genesis, you were a Sega kid. And obviously some kids, I'm sure, had both. Some kids saved up their allowance. Some kids were in richer families. Some kids didn't have either, and they longed.
Some kids stole.
Some kids stole.
Borrowed it from a friend and then moved away.
So, as a Nintendo kid, because obviously I had an NES, and then my parents got me a Super Nintendo for my birthday. I didn't even ask for a Super Nintendo for my birthday. They just got me a Super Nintendo for my birthday. And I was just like, this is too much. I feel bad. Like I'm going to have to work this off, like karmically. Like I'm going to have to I didn't ask for this. I know this is expensive. And that being said, I was happy to have a Super Nintendo. I thought Super Mario World looked amazing compared to the NES. All those
beautiful colors.
Yeah, those big pillars that would come down. It was just amazing. But I was all in on Nintendo, and then Sega started airing these commercials where you're a loser if you have Nintendo. And I was like, oh, I'm sad. My self-esteem. Because when you're that age, your self-esteem is non-existent. I mean, I
was about to say it's not there.
Yeah. And it was worse for me because I didn't realize I was suffering from bipolar 2. So I had a lot of depression and anxiety, innate to my, my chemical makeup. And so it was rough times. And so I was just like, oh, wow, Nintendo, fight back. What are you doing, Nintendo?
Do something. I don't want to sit here and have to justify my life choices to these snot-nosed brats.
Not even my life choices, my parents' life choices. And it's also silly. But when you're 9 years old, it's life and death. It's the most serious thing in the world. It's playground credibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you just had to just kind of grin and bear it as a Nintendo kid. And it's not like in those days you could just jump online and find your community. So generally speaking, I think most of my friends had Super Nintendos, right? We always knew somebody who had a Genesis, and maybe you'd play it via them. But it was just basically like we all have the same consoles. That way we could bring over our games to each other's house and play them on their system. And you kind of got that cultural exchange then, because not everybody would have every game, but your friend would have this game. So they'd come over and you play it with them. And maybe then you'd rent it. And then maybe if you really like it, you know, as a birthday gift or a gift for the holidays, you ask for that game. But, yeah, Donkey Kong Country marked really Nintendo fighting back for the first time against Sega. And not just fighting back, but just punching them in the throat. Just absolutely. It was just like...
It's always the throat with you.
I love getting punched in the throat. It's such a life-affirming feeling because you feel pain. You can't breathe momentarily. You can't even swallow. And you're just like, wow, this sucks. But I know what it means to be alive.
And to almost die, I guess.
Yeah, well, that was big in the 90s, right? Like extreme sports, the X Games, you chugging Mountain Dew or Surge as you like skateboard into the Grand Canyon. I mean, that was the 90s.
Yeah, you get punched in the throat. You can't, as Nintendo Play It Loud would say, hawk a loogie at life.
Meme Muppet says, my parents got me a top loader NES when the SNES was already out. I was so disappointed.
Sorry about your life, guy.
That being said, I saw those top loader NESs, like that latter day model of a Nintendo Entertainment System that came out. And I was always just like, that's so cool. I want that, even though I have a perfectly functional NES. You know, it still works. I can play it all I want, but that top loader looks so cool. I just want one to also have
the game.
I would like look at things like I got like just the standard black Nintendo 64, right? And then the jungle green Donkey Kong 64 N64 came out in 1999. And even though I had an N64, there was part of me that's like, I wish I had that one. That one's green. That one's jungle green. Green and a little clear. That looks so cool.
It's like those Game Boys where it's like, you can see the inside of it.
That was a big thing in the 90s too. Like, the Game Boys, the like landline phones that you could see through. You could see all the little parts inside.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big thing in the 90s. Clear plastic, being able to see the inner workings of things. We were easily amused back then. in the days
Take me back.
Yeah, in the days before even dial-up, we were just like, "Whoa, clear plastic! It is the future."
We need more of that in the current day.
We do. We just need.
I want to see what my Switch looks like.
Right? Yeah, come on. But yeah, Play It Loud. Like again, people make fun of it, but it was, I think, the right ad campaign for the right time because, and it wouldn't have worked if they couldn't back it up with Donkey Kong Country. The fact that they could back it up with Donkey Kong Country, it was just an instant TKO for Sega. For the Genesis. And granted, Nintendo's victory was short-lived because, you know, then the PlayStation just overtook everything. But they did win the 16-bit console wars. They did slay the beast that plagued them for so long. And I don't think Sega ever really recovered in the West. I mean, this was an opinion piece. This is one of the very first features that DK Vine ever wrote in 1999 when we were just dumb kids and we were like, how Donkey Kong Country killed the Sega Genesis. But it's been backed up recently. YouTube videos have come out and said, yeah, that's what happened. The book Console Wars concurs. So it's like, we weren't wrong. We weren't wrong.
How the Genesis lost its twang.
And yeah, this is my era of Nintendo, the Play It Loud era. And I realize I've talked a lot about this with Josh Wallen from Off with the Geek Critique, but it is kind of this mirage of an era. This wasn't a real era for Nintendo. This was a marketing campaign that Nintendo of America ran for 2 years leading up to the Nintendo 64. A little bit after the N64. Like, they still used Play It Loud branding for Super Nintendo and original Game Boy products for a time. But, you know, it was this attitude and this image that Nintendo projected until they didn't need to anymore. And then they kind of adopted a more universal, more international approach, kind of consolidating all the different Nintendo divisions under one sort of just cohesive branding and identity. I mean, that's part of the reason why they went to the Nintendo 64 branding over Nintendo Ultra 64 in the West, because they just wanted to have that global brand, which is smart as globalization was really like ramping up in the late 90s into the aughts and everybody started getting online. And I mean, it makes sense. I just think they should have gone with Nintendo Ultra 64 worldwide because that's a cooler name. Anyway.
Yeah.
Like, I understand, like, the Play It Loud era, it was kind of a transition away from that earlier era of Nintendo in the West to that more global Nintendo identity from 1996 onwards. But it's always going to be my favorite era, and partly because it was the era where the Kongs were kind of the de facto Nintendo mascots.
Like, I mean, again, I wasn't around for the Play It Loud era.
Yeah.
But I really love watching those old commercials and just seeing how crazy, edgy, and wild they are.
Ridiculous. But... yeah. It's basically, you know, the character Funky Kong. Well, just imagine that for your marketing campaign.
Uh-huh.
It works. But no, like, Donkey Kong Country to the N64 also marked a time when Mario was more or less on the back burner. Yes, we had Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island come out in 1995, but that was just Baby Mario. Like, Yoshi was more prominent during this time than Mario was. So it was really an era where there wasn't anything in the way of Zelda. There wasn't anything in the way of Mario. Pokemon was still a ways out. So it really did feel like Donkey Kong and Diddy Kong, and to a lesser extent Dixie Kong a year later, they were the faces of Nintendo, or at least Nintendo of America and other Western divisions for those 2 years. And God, that felt sweet, Malik.
Again, in retrospect, I'm like, yeah, this is a good time to be a Donkey Kong fan. I mean, it's always a good time to be a Donkey Kong fan, but you know what I mean. Just absorbing it all.
Check it in with the live stream. Chris says, the problem with a top loader, as I found out with my SNES, as they like to call it, is that your idiot friend can manage to drop chocolate in it. Yeah.
That really sucks.
Yeah, don't. That's why
what happened to you.
I was always very precious with my stuff, and I would make sure my friends never soiled them. Speak of the devil, Josh Wallen has joined us. I want the banana N64 controller. Martro says, I had the green N64. My biggest regret is giving it away. Ow! That hurts my heart.
It hurts something else in me. I don't know what it is, but it hurts.
Meme Up, it says clear pagers. That's the ultimate 90s accessory.
Clear pagers. I might have to look that one up.
My father had a pager, I remember. And I just remember thinking,
oh,
that just seems obtrusive. Like, getting a notification that somebody, like, wants to reach out to you. Like, I can't imagine. Like, what if you don't want to be reached? And now I have a phone in my pocket 24 hours a day.
Nobody reaches me, but that's okay. My phone is basically a beeper.
Josh says, I think you could still see echoes of Play It Loud through the N64 era, the Get In or Get Out era, and the mid-aughts, the Who Are You campaign was very much that decade's version of Play It Loud. Yeah, but like Play It Loud also like had this, there was this element of like, and this was very like period appropriate, right? So there's that grungy aesthetic, that very, I mean, appropriate for Nintendo of America's location being in Redmond, just outside of Seattle, which is kind of the epicenter of 90s culture, that grunge, Pearl Jam, kind of flannel shirt look, but like mixed in with kind of, I feel like the Who Are You campaign in particular, the Get In or Get Out and Who Are You campaign, it didn't thumb its nose at authority nearly as much. And maybe that's just a matter of perception and perspective, but I feel like Play It Loud, what it reminded me of, right, was I was also a Nickelodeon kid in the early 90s, Malik. Like, for me, I wasn't a Disney child. For me, Nickelodeon spoke to me because Nickelodeon was like kids' counterculture.
Like by kids for kids.
Yeah, and it was like, you know what? Fuck adults. Adults, we got to take down this adult conspiracy to hold us down, the kids. and that's
these children shows made by adults, but no, I get it.
Yeah. No, yeah, I mean, we didn't think about that because those were cool adults. They were going to be spared by the revolution because they understood us. They didn't talk down to us, and that's the thing. Nickelodeon didn't talk down. It didn't have that condescending tone, at least as a kid consuming the shows and the cartoons. It really made me feel like I wasn't being patronized, or patronized. It made me feel like I was being respected for who I was. And I think that was a big sticking point for me when it came to any kids media. And it's one of the reasons I couldn't get into so much of the stuff that adults would kind of push on me. Like, you're a kid, you'll like this. And I'm like, I feel like I'm being talked down to. I feel like you think I'm dumb.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm stupid, but I'm not that stupid.
Well, yeah, I mean, different strokes for everyone, right? That's just the way I felt as a kid. But Nickelodeon was like this huge, like, rallying cry where it's like, I don't have to be talked down to. And yeah, Nickelodeon stuff was still dumb as hell. I mean, it was still kids' entertainment. But as a kid during that era, it felt like it was elevated. It felt like it respected me. And that's what the Play It Loud campaign also felt like. It felt like Nintendo was no longer like talking down to me so much, but it was more like it's on my level, and it's like, I mean, it's dumb because it's and it's dumb because it's a international corporation's marketing campaign, but it clearly worked because I bought into it.
It was fun. I mean, what you gonna do? That I like that.
Yeah. And Josh points out that obviously the Kongs weren't front and center, but in the Get In or Get Out or Who Are You campaigns. And I think that's the big point too, is the Kongs were the perfect spokespeople for this era of Nintendo. Like them and the Killer Instinct cast. It really was just like the epitome of the 90s. You had Funky Kong, the surfer dude. You had Donkey Kong, the slacker Gen Xer who's trying to be a functioning adult. You had Diddy, the anxious millennial. Before we even defined them as
Cranky,
millennial,
the old man.
Cranky, the bitter old boomer who's starting to really just, like, that was the thing in the 90s too. The boomers just wouldn't stop yammering about being boomers, how great they were, the boomers, how great their generation was. And look, I like a lot of boomers. I like a lot of the boomers culture, mostly their music. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Great music, but like
good music, yeah.
Get off your high horse. I get it. Forrest Gump. Yeah, I get it. Oh yeah, Vietnam. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, like everything about Donkey Kong Country was just this forward shift for Nintendo. And it was also, as I said, everything I'd ever wanted in a video game. It was my introduction to the Greg Mayles design philosophy. Honestly, I feel like, even though Greg Mayles, of course, worked on lots of stuff before Donkey Kong Country at Rare, I think Donkey Kong Country was really where the Greg Mayles design idea really crystallized. I mean, it really like set itself apart, because what Greg Mayles' design is, and you can listen to the episode Mitchell and I did about Greg Mayles earlier this season for a more articulate expansion of what I'm about to say, but it's taking those typical tropey video game elements and keeping them to the barest minimum possible. Like the HUD, right? The HUD in Donkey Kong Country, the banana tally, the life balloon total. It's only on the screen when you collect the items themselves, or like you enter a level or you lose a life or whatever, and then you'll see it. But otherwise, it's kept off the screen. The screen is just the environment itself. Atmosphere.
Yeah, and they. Oh yeah, no. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, atmosphere and emotion are put at the forefront of all of Greg's games. You feel things when you play them. You feel genuine emotion. You feel stirrings of the soul, whether that is elation or it's fear, it's dread. You run the gamut when in his games. And this extends from Donkey Kong Country all the way to Sea of Thieves, right? I've talked about before when I got to visit Rare in 2016, and like we got to sit in on like a mock design meeting with Greg Mayles, like what that would look like. And it was basically Greg pitching the philosophy of Sea of Thieves to us. And he brought up the wheel of emotion. All the emotions he wants you to feel when you play Sea of Thieves. But that was evident in Donkey Kong Country, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was honestly the first time I'd ever been in awe of a video game, other than, oh, it's a generational leap forward. I'm playing Super Mario World, and wow, look at those big spiky pillars come down in this castle. That's amazing. This is the first time I played a video game and I felt like I believed the world existed. Obviously, I know it doesn't exist, but I felt like it was a tangibly real place.
Yeah, like I'm thinking of a couple of earlier Greg Mayles games that he worked on. I think Snake Rattle and Roll and Battletoads, and I don't feel much when I play those other than rage.
I also think maybe Donkey Kong Country with the Silicon Graphics workstations and everything that they could do, I think it was maybe the first time that the hardware was able to match Greg's vision that maybe was always there.
Mm-hmm.
And he could really like flex and make the game he always wanted to make. Like it was received by me as the game I had always wanted, but I'm sure for the creators themselves, it was also this like validation of, yes, we can finally do this.
I think so too, yeah.
Like I remember like Ropey Rampage, the second level, how cool that rain felt when you first enter that stage and you're just in the middle of a thunderstorm and you're like, am I really seeing this? Because before, like, rain, if there's ever rain in a video game, it was barely there, right? It never felt like a torrential downpour. And all of a sudden, you had what felt like realistic weather effects in a video game. And then, of course, Coral Capers, like, that majesty was just breathtaking. When you actually got, like, it was the first time I was in a water level where I was really like, oh, wow. Like, this feels tranquil in a way that, like, nothing else I've ever experienced in a video game has ever felt.
I'm thinking back to, like, you just reminded me of what I first thought of Ropey Rampage, because I used to be absolutely terrified of thunderstorms as a child, but yeah, when I first got into Ropey Rampage, like, I didn't freak out, but I was, like, on edge. And then by the time you got to the end and everything cleared up, I remember having, like, this just sigh of relief where it's like, oh, it's over. It's all sunny again.
Right.
That's good.
Malik, that's the wheel of emotion.
Mm-hmm.
You felt exactly what Greg Mayles wanted you to feel.
Yeah, when I was like 5, 6 years old, I was like, oh, thank goodness, we're almost at the end. It's nice and sunny. The butterflies are coming out. It's just like the end of a thunderstorm, and I don't have to worry until like summer comes around again.
In the live stream, we got a first time chatter here. It's Fuj11 Row or Fujiro says, confession, realizing that these apes, parentheses, my friends, don't actually exist, gave my young little self real existential angst. Well, I do recommend you watch my video, DKU Lore Tour, Breaking the Fourth Wall with a Barrel, the video game reality of Rare, where I make a well-reasoned argument that maybe on some metaphysical level Donkey Kong does exist. That might help placate your nerves a little bit. But that's
like Santa Claus, he exists in your heart.
Santa Claus is the spirit of Christmas, Malik. I absolutely agree. Mm-hmm. Santa Claus exists so long as we will him into existence. But that's a good segue for the characters, discussing these characters, because it wasn't just Greg Mayles' artistry and philosophy, which of course I'm still enamored with to this day. Like I've tried to talk about this the few times I've had the absolute privilege of talking with Greg Mayles. Like, dude, you make the games I've always wanted to make. He's very humble. He's very shy. And I think it makes him uncomfortable when you like say he's basically
he's
like
a god.
He's basically another Miyamoto. He doesn't want to hear it. So I can never articulate to him exactly what his games, and he'll always be like, well, it's a collaborative effort. It's not just me. I know it's not just you, Greg, but come on. Anyway.
Yeah.
The characters are the other core component. And like I said, it was Cranky Kong. It was the introduction of Cranky in the manual that really won me over with this game, right? Because it's one thing if you have the amazing visuals and the absolutely splendid environments. It's another thing, though, if the characters aren't interesting or they just are, I don't know.
Plywood?
Blank slates.
Standees.
Yeah. Because the two protagonists, Donkey and Diddy, as designed by Kev Bayless, they really moved away from the whole trope of the silent Nintendo protagonist. The Nintendo protagonist that's just a blank slate that you, the player, have to project your personality onto.
Yeah, these guys scream.
Their eyes bug out. They have rage. They have sorrow, but
they disrespect each other, hitting each other on the head, biting each other's fingers.
Yeah. They're scamps. Just a couple of lads.
I always wanted out of a game.
I really think that Donkey and Diddy, they walk that line between appealing to both children and teenagers. Like, I think there's something for everyone in those characters. And obviously their portrayals have kind of shifted a little bit over 30 years. I think Diddy has stayed mostly consistent. Donkey, of course, fluctuates wildly depending on if Diddy is with him or not, or if he's paired with Mario, or, Donkey can be anything from a laid back, like lazy, like adult who kind of eschews responsibility to a maniac rageaholic. But
he straddles both camps.
He does. That first game, though, Donkey Kong really was just the quintessential adult of the 1990s. A Gen Xer who kind of just wants to lay about. He kind of doesn't want the responsibility. He's kind of overwhelmed with modern life. He really just wants to sit on a chair on the beach or just sleeping in his bed in a hammock or somewhere. Diddy, I've said this before, Diddy is the ultimate millennial protagonist. As a millennial, I see so much of myself in Diddy. The anxiety, the desire for greatness, but knowing that the ladder has kind of been pulled up before I get to it, that like constant struggle between your own lack of self-esteem and then, and this is where my bipolar disorder comes in, that euphoric sense of like, I can do no wrong when you have the manic upswings. That's Diddy and Donkey Kong 64 mainly, but like in this game, he just wants to be like Donkey Kong so bad, and just the dichotomy of Donkey Kong being this big strong gorilla and Diddy being this small little monkey. That is so perfect. They're such perfect designs, and it's just so like I can really understand why this team was so adamant that they go with this design for the sidekick character, whether it's Donkey Kong Jr. or not, and why Nintendo's like, look, you can use this design, but if you use this design, it can't be Donkey Kong Jr. And they're like, fine, we believe in this design, we believe in this portrayal of this character, we're going to make him a new character. And of course, then it just supplanted any notion of Donkey Kong Jr. in his traditional role from there on, because Diddy is, with all due respect to the game Donkey Kong Jr., Diddy's just a far superior character.
That's what I was going to say. Like, when I was a kid, I never really saw the whole, like, Diddy is this, like, upstart who's just trying to be like his hero. And it never really crossed my mind that Diddy was a child. I just thought he was a smaller ape guy. But I always saw, especially when the manual said, there are some things Diddy can't do, and there's some things that Donkey can't do that Diddy can. I always saw the guys as equals. I never saw as like, yeah, I didn't see Diddy as like the cute little nephew who's just trying to be. Well, I did see that in the manual where it said like he wanted to be, he's a video game hero wannabe, but yeah, with everything Diddy could do, especially when you're playing the game where it's like, look at all these things Diddy can do that Donkey Kong can't do. I was like, Diddy's the best. What are you talking about? He's already a hero in my eyes. He's cool.
Yeah, like, I think that portrayal where they're equals is the valid, correct interpretation nowadays. Our go-to example here at DK Vine, we all love the Subspace Emissary introductory scene of Donkey and Diddy, where they're just like adventuring buddies, like they're equals, and they just like this devil may care attitude. They're just, shooting down bullet bills and, standing heroically as it explodes behind them. And like, I think Diddy did earn his way. Like, that's the great thing about these games, too, is, like, where Diddy starts versus where he ends. Like, Donkey Kong Country 2, that whole hero journey for him, and him having that victorious moment of being, like, effectively knighted by Cranky Kong. You are a video game hero now. And then he gets his own video game a couple years after that, Diddy Kong Racing, which, of course, wasn't ever the plan. It's not like Rare planned this arc out like, all right, well, we're going to introduce Diddy Kong in this game so we can have him star in a RC Pro-Am game 3 years down the line.
This is phase 2 of the Diddy Kong of the DKU.
But that's the way it felt in the 90s when we didn't know any better. I mean, I swear, like, I know the DKU wasn't planned out. It was a bunch of happy accidents and, like, second or third plans when the first two fell through. Like, it wasn't supposed to happen the way it did, but it did feel like Rare had this, like, whole structure planned out. Like, okay, yes, this is phase 2 of the DKU, where Diddy Kong gets his own game, and we're introducing Banjo and Conker and Tricky, and then we'll really get into the history of dinosaurs in this world. But that's the way it felt, because it all felt so effortless and flawless. Like, they just rolled with the punches, and it made it just feel like, yeah, like, hit me again, Rare. Like, give me the next journey in this cinematic universe, or I guess video game universe. Cinematic universes weren't really a thing, but
it felt cinematic.
Yeah, it felt cinematic. It felt like the grandest story ever told. The story of Diddy Kong, I swear. But yeah, like the rest of the cast then. And this is all, like a bit of the like Greg Mayles design philosophy, like get characters in there to serve functions, to serve like just essential roles that could just be filled with text or not even characters at all, but characters make it more rewarding. Characters invest you a little bit more, and you're always happy to see them, right? So getting to visit Cranky, getting to visit Funky, getting to visit Candy, and then of course the animal buddies, bulk of which were designed by Steve Mayles. The animal buddies, and Jeff and I just talked about this on the last episode of the Kongversation, where we ranked the 17 standalone characters in Donkey Kong Country, the 5 Kongs, the 5 animal buddies, and the 7 bosses. We ranked them in a tier list, Malik, and
it was a good listen. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. But the animal buddies are just perfect. And I said this on social media earlier today. I said that what I love about the animal buddies and the way they're designed in this game is the restraints that they had, where Rambi is just a rhino that you ride around on. He's kind of like a big dog. Winky
no
is a big
or nothing.
Winky is a big frog. Squawks is a little parrot. He holds a flashlight, but that's it. Like that is exciting enough as a kid, getting to ride on these wild animals who in your life you might only ever see in the zoo, right? But getting to ride them as steeds, getting to have them as effectively big pets for the Kongs, that is just right to the center of a kid's heart.
Oh, yeah. Because, I mean, I was obsessed with animals as a kid. And I mean, I still am now. But yeah, seeing Rambi and just going through the jungle, it was just like, oh, my goodness. It was amazing.
It really was. Yeah, like, I talked about this on the episode that Josh and I did on the Donkey Kong Nintendo Direct for the theme park, Miyamoto's Walkabout, where I was so thankful that Rambi didn't have any dialogue when he popped out of his crate, because Rambi is so appealing to me. I know there's like a UK comic strip that gave Rambi like speech, but not canon. But for me, like, Rambi works when he's just a big dog. Like, you can have Squawks have some dialogue because he's a parrot. You can stretch that out. That's fine. But, like, if they had, like, gone all in on the animals as, like, personalities, like, I said, what if they gave Squawks a monocle or something? You'd ruin Squawks, right? Like, it's one thing to put sneakers on Squitter, the spider, or Espresso in this game, right? Because, okay, maybe the Kongs put sneakers on them so they can move faster. That's cute. That's clever. But if you, like, if you gave Squitter a top hat and a Audrey Hepburn, like, cigarette, like, holder, you know? And he's just like, hey, yes, I'm Squitter, the spider. Hello.
Oh, yes.
That would,
you
that
want
would
to
ruin
jump
him.
on some web with me?
That would be so dumb. And I would be like, fuck this guy. Like,
who does he think he is?
Thinks he's better than me with his fancy posh clothing. He wears sneakers. Criminal. He wears trainers. He's one of us.
Mm-hmm. He's a man of the people. The people's spider.
Salt of the earth. It is that the animal buddies are just like regularly proportioned wild animals with exaggerated features and big googly eyes. That's it. That's all you need to make them perfect. And that's why I think they resonate so much with the fans.
I think so too. Yeah. Just not too much. It's just a perfect design. I think about, would I add anything to these guys if I had the chance to redesign them? And honestly, no, they're fine as they are.
Yeah. I love all of the animal buddies. I mean, seriously, I love all of the animal buddies. I don't care who they are, in what game they appear. Like I love Hoofer, Orko, Flurl from Jungle Beat.
Yeah, they're good too.
The only animal buddies.
Sit at the table.
What's that?
They can sit at the table. They can get invited to the cookout.
I think they should. I think they should be invited. Yeah. The only animal buddies I'm a little iffy on are they're barely animal buddies. The ones that appear in the background of Returns. You know, you got the giraffe and the zebra and the squirrel and the elephant who's not Ellie. But I want them to flesh those characters out more. Like, I would love if the giraffe would come back as a rideable animal buddy. But my only issue with them is just like, why aren't they just the animal buddies we know? It would have more resonance if we actually knew them.
Yeah. I think I might have said it here before, but yeah, when Returns came out and they were like, Donkey Kong's animal friends have all been hypnotized and he has to save them. I'm like, who are these people? These aren't his friends. Who are these guys?
Yeah. It's too much of a hard break from the past. And we'll get into that, I think, in our final thoughts when we talk about how far Donkey Kong Country has come and the struggles it's had over the years. But in a live stream, we have a comment question. How/when did you guys discover the levels had bonus rooms and an exclamation point meant you'd found them all? That's a good question.
Okay, so let's see. When did we discover levels had bonus rooms? Is that part of the question?
Yes. Yes. I think it's a 2-point question.
Okay, so I found out the game had bonus rooms like in the very first level when when you ride on Rambi and you just see that thing and it's like, oh, there's a bonus room there. And I recognized the exclamation points when I was younger, but I didn't put 2 and 2 together until maybe I was maybe 12.
Mm-hmm.
So it took me quite a while to realize, if you got all the bonus rooms, then that means you'll get an exclamation point. I didn't put 2 and 2 together for years.
Yeah, so obviously with the bonus levels, I found them immediately because the way Jungle Hijinks is structured. I'm making a video about this actually right now, like the brilliance of that first level of Donkey Kong Country. But the way Jungle Hijinks is structured, you almost have to discover the bonus rooms, right? Like, it's designed so you just kind of stroll into them and you're introduced to the concept in a way where your brain doesn't realize your hand is being held, but it's being held. So I knew about the bonus rooms pretty early on. I remember it was probably late in the game when I put 2 and 2 together. Like, I recognized the exclamation points were appearing on some levels, but then I was like, was that exclamation point always there? Like, are they just really excited about this level? Like, yeah. Jungle Hijinks! And then this level, they're not as excited about it. Like, Reptile Rumble.
That doesn't sound too fun, does it?
Temple Tempest.
You can skip this one.
And I think it was later in the game where I finally put it together. I think the exclamation points mean you found all the bonus rooms. And I was correct, eventually. But, of course, Donkey Kong Land, like if I had any doubt about it, Donkey Kong Land really dispelled it because Donkey Kong Land didn't display the titles on the map screen. But what it did do was it put an exclamation point like just right over the actual like dot for the level. So you'd have this exclamation point just jutting up on the map. And so I was like, that's what the exclamation point means. I was right.
That took me years to figure out because I was mostly fixated on just the fact that the level pad was always flashing. So I couldn't really see the exclamation point. I was like, what is this little ribbony thing coming out of the little circular pad? What does that mean?
Talking about our animal buddy discussion, Chris says, why are we making Espresso a chain smoker? He doesn't need this. He's got rubbish legs. First time in the chat, we have Ingalls91 says, Posh Squitter would no longer be a Donkey Kong character. He'd be a Conquer character. Yeah. all of the Posh characters, all the like criticisms of, like class in the UK. That's for the Conquer series. Donkey Kong, they're all more a collective of equals, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, I feel like Kong society is pretty uniform. There aren't haves and have-nots, except like maybe Manky Kong, but that just like they're just bad eggs, so they're kind of expelled.
Yeah, they're jerks.
Yeah, yeah. Assholes have no standing in Kong society, but generally speaking, I feel like everyone like I don't think it's like I don't know the makeup of Kong society. Obviously, there's a little bit of like money being traded back and forth. But I don't think it's like a full-on Star Trek utopia, but I think it's like they make sure that they look out for each other, Kong Society.
Mm-hmm.
There's no like, oh, you're born wealthy. I know I went on a rant on the last episode about Donkey Kong Jr. being a Nepo baby, but I don't even think that matters as much.
Yeah, no.
I feel like, though, before we move on from the characters, we should talk about the baddies a little bit. People would be upset if I didn't talk about the Kremlings, K. Rool a little bit. But I don't really have anything else to say about them on this episode. Like, I feel like I've talked about them so much. Perfect antagonist.
Yeah, I won't argue with you there. Like, it's all great. I love all the enemies, and just they might be my favorite lineup in the trilogy. I mean, I do like the whole pirate theming with DKC2, and I mean, we did an entire conversation just talking about the pirate Kremlings and all the baddies there. But there's just something about this original crew where I'm like, I like every single one of these guys. Well, I like all the other enemies from the other games too, but there's just something about this crew where it's like, it really just resonates with me. I don't know what it is, but maybe it's nostalgia, but I like I like the reds of the slippas, the greens of that. I really like how they get crazy with some of the multicolors for like zingers and claptraps and things like that.
Right.
It's like, oh yeah, this guy's red, this guy's green, blue. I really like that.
It's another one of those happy accidents that we're talking about. Like, because the Kremlings, as a core concept, were not designed for Donkey Kong Country, but it just worked. Like, they are the perfect antagonists. And again, I did a video about the Kremlings where I kind of got into a little bit of the why they resonate so much as antagonists to the primate Kongs. And I think it's just something like embedded deep in our cultural DNA about like warm-blooded versus cold-blooded, reptiles versus simians. There's just something
Skin versus scales.
Yeah. There's just something so fundamentally true. Like, looking at like the struggles on this planet, like evolution, and going from era to era. I think like having the Kremlings be like the dominant force of this island, of this archipelago from an earlier age, and the rise of the Kongs happen, and they're still like at odds with each other. There's so much unspoken in that first game, but that's communicated through visual clues, like the fact that these temples exist on Donkey Kong Island, but they're temples clearly built by the Kremlings. And then you've got like the Kremlings still trying to do stuff on this island, like polluting factories, and like there's just so many layers that really make you think about this world. And even when you're not playing the game, if you're really into this game like I was, you would still think about it when you're not playing it. And then you would like consider what makes this world tick. Like, what happens before the game starts? What happens after the game ends? What happens in between? And that's, I think, the hallmarks of just great world building. And it's a very simple game. I'm not saying this is like some sort of grand RPG with the most beautifully crafted narrative. It's a game about a big crocodile man king stealing a gorilla's bananas. It's dumb.
There's beauty in the simplicity.
It's outrageously stupid. It's almost insultingly idiotic. It's a game for dumb, drooling morons. But what I'm saying, though, is that
put that on the box.
That simplicity, as you said, Malik, it has nuances. It has so many like different avenues you can take the series after this. And some of them they fully explored, some of them they haven't really touched since then. But it really just makes that world so tantalizing. It's a world you want to revisit. Even if you're not revisiting it playing games, you're just revisiting it in your mind. I think that foundation for the future is also what made Donkey Kong Country so exciting, because, yes, like, I can't wait to see what else they do with this.
Totally.
And
Yeah.
yeah, the Kremlings were a big part of that. I like the Tiki Tac tribe. Like I don't hate the Tiki Tac tribe like a lot of older fans do. I like the Snowmads. I like that Donkey Kong is a big rogues gallery, but I think it is true that the Kremlings just work the best for antagonist.
I'm sure when Retro was making the Tiki Chak tribe and the Snowmads, that was probably still in the back of their heads, even though they were like, we want to do something original. But I'm sure they were like, man, the Kremlings are so cool.
I of course
But
I don't
we're committed.
I don't have any inside knowledge about this, but I wouldn't be surprised if when they were doing the Snowmads, they were just looking at the Kremlings and be like, how can we recreate this? How can we like sort of dissect what made the Kremlings work and put them into a new enemy faction? Because you look at the Snowmads, and so much of the Snowmads they're not 1-to-1 like analogs to the Kremlings, but you can clearly see they studied the Kremlings throughout all the Donkey Kong games and tried to bring what works into the Snowmads. And I mean, to varying degrees of success, you're never going to do something better than the original. But
I admire that they tried.
Yeah, I think the Snowmads have a lot of the Kremling's personality. So yeah, there's a clear attempt after the Tiki Tac tribe to be like, okay, well, the hardcore fans really didn't warm up to the Tikis quite as much as we would have liked, because I feel like the Tikis are they're more Mario baddies, where they're stout, they're lacking much in the way of personality.
Yeah.
And I like what they represent for the lore. I like some of the designs for them. I'm fine with them being part of the theme park. Like it's part of the history now. I mean, it's there. I like to see them, but yeah, I'm always going to be a Kremling kid.
Yeah, same here. Even though, again, I was probably the perfect age for the Tiki Tac tribe when Returns came out. I was still like, nah, Kremlings are still cooler to me.
Yeah. I do think that for a large percentage of fans who maybe aren't as old as I am, the Donkey Kong Country cartoon also pushed the Kremlings over the edge for them.
I would say that too, yeah. I mean, they did show quite a bit of personality.
I've said this before, but my stance on the country cartoon as the purist, as the video game, like absolutist, like, no, this is the canon for Donkey Kong. The cartoon gets it all wrong. I've unclenched a little bit. I've softened my stance on the cartoon because of how it swayed people in a Smash ballot and got them on the side of like, yeah, K. Rool deserves to be in this because look what K. Rool is capable of. We wouldn't have had that if it hadn't been for the cartoon. So, and all the memes.
Oh, of course. Yeah. It's beautiful.
So we need to talk about the music a little bit. I think in any retrospective for Donkey Kong Country, we would be criminally negligent if we didn't discuss the soundtrack. And the New York Times, of all things, ran an article this week about David Wise, which, you know, my feelings on the New York Times right now are at an all-time low. I'm not going to get into it, but basically I feel like they've done a very, very poor job of informing the readers. They've buried stories they shouldn't have buried recently, and basically talk about Nepo babies. The New York Times is run by one, but it's still a big deal that the New York Times did an editorial about David Wise, of all things. And they got some facts wrong. Amusingly, they referred to the track Mining Melancholy as Mining Melancholy in their article. And I'm like, well, New York Times, I got news for you. That's not the official track name.
It never has been.
Never has been. So, cannons clanking. Somebody hasn't downloaded the Nintendo Music app, but
no, loser.
And of
I
course,
haven't either.
And of course, it got some facts wrong. Like it basically attributed the entire soundtrack to David Wise, and we just want to. David Wise did a lot. David Wise has composed some magnificent music, but Evelyn Novakovic had a large hand
right there
in this soundtrack for the original game and Donkey Kong Country 3. So her contributions get so overshadowed compared to David Wise. And part of that too is Evelyn Novkovic isn't really active on social media. She's not like she hasn't like self-promoted since then. And so,
Yeah, there might be an interview every now and again that pops up with her, and it's always surprising, but nowhere to the extent of David Wise.
Yeah, she's pretty much, I think, retired, and hope she's having a happy life. But we will still celebrate her contributions here on the Kongversation as much as we can. But the soundtrack of Donkey Kong Country, it always seemed to emanate from the levels, like even the more melodic songs, it always felt like they were almost coming from the environments themselves, rather than it just being this soundtrack being overlaid on the video game you were playing.
For sure. Like the first thing I think of is Jungle Hijinks and just hearing the birds chirping at the beginning of the song. It's like, oh, listen to that. That's so cool.
Birds chirping, you had in the caves, like the dripping water from the stalactites. Going into the temples, there was almost this like chant, like the voices from the past, like being embedded in the stone. It was like, oh, and it just always felt like when you entered a stage, it was this ambience, not aquatic ambience. I mean, sometimes aquatic ambience, but this ambient noise that would then slowly build into a song structure. And so your brain doesn't even realize it's happening. So you just feel like it is just sound effects. And then eventually it forms into this ball of song, this tune. But it's so organically done. And it's such a slow process that like the later games don't really do this. It's more just like some of them do it a little bit, but like the aforementioned cannons clanking does have the pickaxes, and it like kind of forms that melody from them, but it really does feel like Donkey Kong Country has this more somber, like of nature kind of musical storytelling that I think makes the game feel a little bit more serious compared to the later entries. Like it feels almost like you are in the solitude of nature, and anything that resembles a melody, anything that resembles song structure is just happenstance.
I think so too. Like, what was it? I always think back to the Northern Hemisphere's theme and how it starts off. Like, it's not snow ambience, but it does like this weird creaking noise where it's like, it's like, what is that? And then the melody starts kicking in, but that one always sticks out to me.
Yeah.
Like, what is this? Where am I?
It's almost like I've always like thought of it on some subconscious level as like the branches of trees creaking under the weight of the snow.
Ooh, I like that.
Okay. It's really hard to choose, but 5 songs, Malik. 5 songs from the Donkey Kong Country soundtrack.
5 songs.
Yeah, go.
Okay, so I'm going to say Northern Hemisphere, Forest Melody,
Forest Frenzy,
or Forest Frenzy, Simian Segway. Let's see, Life in the Mines, and I will say, what's this? I'll just say Jungle Hijinks, just DK Island Swing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
for me, it was kind of hard because also my opinion on this fluctuates. So ask me again on the 35th anniversary and it'll probably be a different list. But
yeah, same here.
Fear Factory, which is atypical of me because it's like the industrial, like grungy, not of nature song from the soundtrack. But I just love it, and it does feel like oppressive. It feels but it doesn't feel deflating either. It's just got this very propulsive beat to it. And again, it feels like it's being like generated by the like machinery in the background. Like some unseen engine is like getting the song going.
Yeah, just blasting music.
I love it. Northern Hemispheres, I'll concur with you there. That is what I love about it, and it's so atypical of a video game of this type. It's a wintry song that has no relation to the holiday season.
No jingly bells.
No jangle bells here, friends. This is talking. It's the Northern Hemisphere, so talking from a Northern Hemisphere perspective, it is January. It is winter in January or early February or even late February or even March, depending on where you live. But
or even April, depending where you live.
I don't get snow in April anymore, man. Not anymore.
I do.
Barely get snow in January.
Consider yourself lucky.
I miss it. I miss. We don't get snow nearly as much as we used to because of climate change. But thanks, Kremlings Industries.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
No, but yeah, I think Northern Hemispheres, it's got that wonderful solitude, that stillness. As a big avid hiker, as somebody who loves being outdoors, and my affinity for nature existed before Donkey Kong Country, but it was definitely exasperated then by Donkey Kong Country. It kind of was an Ouroboros. It fed into it because I was fortunate. For all of my parents' flaws raising me, they did take me out, like hiking every so often, like not strenuous hikes, just like little jaunts on relatively flat trails. But it did instill in me this appreciation of the forest, nature, which I then really like as I got older and I was old enough to drive and go out by myself. I would, like find joy and find contentment in doing that, like hiking into the mountains and seeing bears and what have you. But for me, like Northern Hemispheres is the perfect epitome of hiking in the forest in the dead of winter, because you have this almost unnatural stillness. There's no birds chirping. There's like no leaves rustling. There's no leaves on the tree unless, you got pine needles and that's it. And it's almost like unsettling how still it is. And you can hear noises from miles and miles away, the slightest disturbance, and you sense it. And it's just like, what was that? And that's the way Northern Hemispheres feels. It's both like comforting and disquieting at the same time. It's one of the best.
It's the song that plays where it's like, if you don't go inside within 20 minutes, you're going to die of hypothermia, but, enjoy it.
Yes, unless you're wearing layers, and this is somebody just wearing a necktie and a monkey not wearing pants, so. Yeah. Forest Frenzy, that's another one that I agree with you. That one has just recently jumped in my esteem. Dustin and I did a Destination DKU episode about Vine Valley, and that reminded me how much I love the song Forest Frenzy.
Really? Yeah. I always thought it was pretty awesome.
Well, I mean, of course, I think all the songs in this are awesome, but like, I think it's jumped in my top 5, and it is a song I would hear, like, again, hiking through the woods, hiking through the forest, because I don't live in a tropical region. I don't live adjacent to a jungle. So for me, like Vine Valley is more representative of where I would experience nature. And so having that Forest Frenzy like song, having that beat in the background of my mind when I'm hiking, it does happen from time to time, and just
Oh yeah. Like when I first played Returns and we got to the forest level, I was so happy to hear like the opening beats, just the boom, 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 boom.
Yeah,
There it is. There it is.
I'll be a basic bitch and say aquatic ambience.
Yeah.
It's
okay.
I mean, it's held in such
It's
wide,
good.
yeah, it's held in such wide esteem for a reason. I mean, I know it's like the most basic thing to say. Oh yeah, I like Aquatic Ambience and Stickerbush Symphony, but you know what? They have that reputation for a reason.
Yeah.
Uh,
Beautiful song.
and then yeah, DK Island Swing. It's iconic for a reason. What I love about it, and what I love about it effectively being the theme of the series, is that it has so much going on in it, and it's got the like different sections of the song, and you never get bored with it.
Yeah, I always get the build up always gets you excited. It's like it's coming, here it comes. Here's the part I really love. But it's not as good unless you have that build up.
Yeah, and then you have the little cooldown before it loops back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good.
Terrific.
Perfect song.
So in the live stream, just checking in.
I just gotta go to the Sorry, I just gotta use the washroom real quick.
Well, okay, Malik. Yeah, Malik, use the washroom. Yeah. I'll read the chat.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Ingalls91 said this game is for dumb drooling morons. Quote Cranky Kong. Put that on a shirt, Hyle. Request March Rose. Yeah, maybe I'll get around to that. Hey, Porygon Q has joined us. Welcome. Chris says Hyle does in fact live adjacent to a jungle. He's just never had cause to look in that direction. No, like people have been planting like non-native plants here that look very tropical. And I'm like, you shouldn't plant non-native plants because it's bad for the insect population. And then they, like, if they're not invasive, okay, maybe, but a lot of these plants are invasive. But as much as I love tropical plants, you know, maybe don't. Maybe reconsider, maybe do some research before you have a planet. I mean, this is how so much of the American South got covered in kudzu. Because they were like, ooh, this fantastic weed from Japan grows in abundance. This would be great to bring over. And now it's like choking entire mountains. Don't do it. Don't. Anyway, Ingalls91 says it's hard to not be cliche in choosing a favorite when so many tracks are genuinely iconic. And that's the thing. Like, they all have a well-deserved reputation. I mean, the entire soundtrack for this trilogy has a well-deserved reputation. And it's really been heartening to see that acknowledgement from Nintendo. The Nintendo Music app, which just launched a couple weeks ago, and how they quickly leaned into Donkey Kong Country. I mean, Donkey Kong Country, the original game, was there at the app's onset, right? And then, like, not even a week into it, here's Donkey Kong Country 2, because we know you want this. We know how vitally important the Donkey Kong Country soundtrack is when we talk about the pantheon of Nintendo soundtracks. That validation is wonderful to see, especially because they're not in-house. I mean, they were done at Rare. And, yeah, like, I can't wait till Donkey Kong Country 3 gets added, and I hope people finally have a chance to reassess that one. I mean, mostly Eveline's handiwork there. People probably wrongly attributed to David Wise because they don't give composer credits in the Nintendo Music app, but yeah, it's been really, really great to see just this surge in recognition, even before the 30th anniversary, for all of the Donkey Kong Country music. And like, I could get into every track and wax poetic about it. Like, I was just thinking about Voices of the Temple, you know, the Temple soundtrack and how great that is. But yeah, like, we could just do an episode about music, but of course I would need to bring in somebody like Matt for that, somebody who's actually a musician, because I don't really know what I'm talking about, do I? Chris says, did you ever try and play?
Came back just a minute ago.
Oh, hi, Malik.
But I didn't want to interrupt. I wanted to hear your little speech, but it was really nice hearing that.
Chris says, did you ever try and play DKC music to your parents, Hyle? I was lucky my mom was a gamer and DKC enthusiast already, so I never had to do the hard work. No, my parents don't understand me. My parents don't understand my interest. It's one of the harsh realities I've had to face getting older is I have no common ground with my parents other than our shared history. But even then, like my mom got me Donkey Kong Country Christmas 94, right? And that was after I had rented it like that first week it was out, and she saw what a big impact it had on me, and so she had the foresight. I didn't ask for Donkey Kong Country. I don't know why I didn't ask for it. Maybe I just was like, well, this game is shit hot. You're not going to be able to find it in stores at this point. But she actually went Black Friday and like got the game, got in line for the game and got it for me. And I mean, it's your fault, Mom. If you hadn't done that, I wouldn't be a Donkey Kong journalist today. But
it sounds like one of those smoking posters, like my mom bought me DKC. Thanks, Mom.
She made me smoke the whole cartridge. No, but I remember like trying to like show my dad like look at this, and he wasn't that impressed. He would be more impressed if it was like a golfing simulator, right? But then I tried to show him Mario Golf in 1999, and he wasn't impressed. So it's like, what do I need to do, Dad? Jesus.
It's like, what do I have to do to earn your validation with this video game stuff?
I will say before we move on from the music, it really like I wasn't a music listener before Donkey Kong Country. I felt like I didn't really have an in to really appreciate music. I didn't have any older siblings. So I didn't have any younger siblings, so I didn't have like hand-me-down music. Like there was the music my parents listened to, but even then, like they would just have like the oldies station on, not even like classic rock, like the oldies station, like doo-wop bubblegum from the 1950s. And so like I was like, music, whatever. And
yeah,
Donkey Kong Country was the first time where I was like, this music is resonating with my soul. It's making me feel spiritual things. And like, yeah, I would like hold a tape recorder up to the TV, the little TV speaker to record the music just so I could carry it around with me. I mean, that's the impact it had. And I talked about this when we were fortunate enough to have David Wise and Kev Bayless on the Kongversation. Like that instilled in me this appreciation for not just music, but like world music. Like like all the different instruments that I would later like discover in different cultures' music, and like even like new age music. Donkey Kong Country like helped lead me to an appreciation for that. And I don't think I would be a big music nerd in addition to being a Donkey Kong nerd if it wasn't for Donkey Kong Country like setting that foundation in me as I also fell in love with this game. So, changed my life, Malik.
Yeah, I wish I had DK Jams growing up because I would have played that nonstop, but I just had to memorize the songs just by ear and just live with that. I didn't even have a tape recorder to do that stuff with, but I would have done that too.
I had the Talk Boy from Home Alone 2.
Oh Lord, I don't even know what that is.
Oh, it's the little tape recorder that Kevin McAllister has in Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, and he gets into all sorts of hijinks with it. He can slow down his voice with it and pretend to be his father and book a posh hotel.
I wish I had done that because I actually started doing when I got my first cell phone in like the late 2000s. I would put it up to YouTube videos and record the sound like off of the computer and do that and have that on my phone for a little bit. So the spirit of it is still there, even though it was like incredibly dinosaurian what I was doing.
Dinosaurian planet, yeah.
Dinosaurian planet, yes. I like that.
And then in 1995, one of the like the big hits with kids in 1995, there was this little device that recorded like 5 seconds of audio. It might have been digital, I don't know, but it was called a yak back. And so you just like held record and it recorded maybe 5 or 10 seconds worth of audio. And then you could play it back. And then whenever you chose to record over it, you just hit record and it would erase it. But you could just store like one audio clip. It was 1995, mind you. So, but like
toys from 2005 that did the same thing.
yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, so like I remember like this was big with the elementary school set, and I like got one as an early Christmas gift from my friend Elliot's mom. And this was right when Donkey Kong Country 2 had just come out a couple of weeks before. So the thing I did with my yak back was I held it up to the TV when Funky's song came on. That bow 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 woo. And I just recorded that opening bit, and then I never erased it. It was just my opening Funky Kong fanfare from Donkey Kong Country 2, and that's what I used that gift for. And so, like, occasionally it would be like my entrance song before I entered a room. I would like play it.
Where's that yak back now? Is it long gone?
So my parents just revealed they're moving. They're moving out of my childhood home. I don't really know why. I think it's just a spur of the moment. My mom recently lost both of her parents, my grandparents, this year, and I think she just is like, I need a change in my life. Let's move. And so they said, hey, we're putting a house on the market this Friday. You have to come get the remainder of your stuff. So it might be sitting in a box that I have in a shed right now, that I had to like abruptly go up there and like get the rest of my childhood possessions. I haven't gone through it all yet, Malik. I don't know. Could be there, could be in the landfill somewhere.
Hopefully you find it.
Well, either way, I doubt it still works. I very much doubt it would still have the opening bar to Funky Kong's theme song in Donkey Kong Country 2. And guess what? If I want to do that, I can just do it on my phone now. You know what? I have it on my phone. Malik, I have the Nintendo Music app right here. I have the entire song. I don't need just 10 seconds of it. Here.
That's DKC 2.
Yeah.
You said DKC?
Yeah.
Oh, darn it.
1995. Yeah. But that's
1995.
That's on the Nintendo Music app.
I'm
now.
Stupid.
No, I don't need a yak back. Go to hell. So really quick, I just want to talk about how perfect of a foundation for the future Donkey Kong Country was. And I alluded to this before, but Donkey Kong Island really was just the perfect jumping off point, not just to build Donkey Kong's world, but also for Rare to accidentally create an entire shared universe off of it. Like, there's, like I said, so much potential there in that first game that they were able to then flesh out with Donkey Kong Land. And then, we're going to move over to the neighboring island in Donkey Kong Country 2. This is where the Kremlings are from. And then, you know what? There's an even bigger island or landmass nearby, the Northern Hemisphere. This is where the bears live. By the way, speaking of bears, Banjo. And I don't know, like
all this.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Never mind. DKC4 Banjo.
No, but like Diddy Kong Racing, even though it wasn't intended to star Diddy Kong when it was like mostly in development, it still worked perfectly because it was like, okay, well then here's Timbers Island over here. And in their adventures, Diddy and Donkey met this guy named Banjo. He lives over in Spiral Mountain, and then Conker lives up in Willow Woods. And, what I think really lent to all of this was that they did kind of just completely separate Donkey Kong from Mario's world. And I know, like, Donkey Kong isn't completely separate from Mario's world nowadays, but, like, Donkey Kong Country, they didn't get, like, bogged down in, like, well, This is just off the coast of the Mushroom Kingdom, and they didn't even address where Mario was or how it related to Donkey Kong Island. And that really let Rare build up their own lore, their own sort of shared universe that still crosses over with Mario, of course, but it's not defined by Mario. And that really not just enabled Rare to have fun with things like Diddy Kong Racing and then like indoctrinate kids into buying Banjo-Kazooie, but it also it also really just made Donkey Kong not feel like a Yoshi or a Wario. Right? Where it feels like, yeah, it's its own series, but ... It really, it
when
like
people make videos. Oh no, you finish your thing.
No, I want to hear your thing. No, you go.
I was just okay. I'll go.
Okay.
I was just gonna say, when people make videos ranking Super Mario characters and they got the Kongs in there, I die a little inside.
Well, I like I said,
yeah.
I think it's a generational thing. I don't fault anybody who was introduced to the Kongs via Mario, even if it's like the Super Mario Brothers movie, even if it's recently. I'm just glad they appreciate the Kongs on some level.
Yeah, that too. I can't be too mad, but there's just a little part that goes like.
Here's the beauty. Here's the beauty, Malik. I think Nintendo does view them as separate now, and we have all this evidence for that. Like, obviously, there's going to be crossover. Just like from the Rare perspective, Donkey Kong and Banjo-Kazooie are sister series. From the Nintendo perspective, Donkey Kong and Mario are sister series. But they're not part of the same series per se. They're related, but they're not like, it's not like Donkey Kong is an ancillary part of the Super Mario series, like Yoshi, like a Wario. And that was like, you look at all those early pitches, like, what if we have Donkey Kong versus Super Wario? Thank God they didn't do that.
Yeah, no, that's gross.
It's disgusting, right? Because
repulsive.
They just set Donkey Kong apart. And they gave Donkey Kong his own enemies. Like, they didn't put in Shy Guys. Like Yoshi got Shy Guys as a hand-me-down. And sure, whatever. I mean, Baby Mario appears in, like, not the first Yoshi game, because there's, like, Yoshi's Cookie and stuff, but, like, the first real Yoshi platformer is still Super Mario World 2 Yoshi's Island. It's still a Mario game, effectively.
Yeah.
Like, the first appearance of Wario was Super Mario Land 2 as a boss, and then the first solo Wario game was Super Mario Land 3. So there's always been that direct spin-off nature to Yoshi and Wario from Super Mario, where the only relation that Donkey Kong Country has to the Super Mario franchise is they both got their start in Donkey Kong Arcade, 1981. And I think this was the smartest decision Rare made when choosing the direction for the game. That, you know what, we're not even going to bring Mario into this. We're not going to bring in any Mario characters into this. This is going to be Donkey Kong's game and Donkey Kong's game alone. And you know what? We're going to give Donkey Kong his own environment. Hell, we're going to give him his own archipelago to reside in. Hell, we're going to give him his own supporting cast, his family, his friends, his lovers. We're going to give him like this enemy faction that has nothing to do with the Koopa Troop or Wario or Shy Guys, but the 8-bits with the Super Mario Brothers 2. Get that out of here. This is Donkey Kong.
I feel like I've seen similar things with like in other universes. Like, I always think Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, and Goofy they have their own things, but they also have, what was it? Yeah, no, they are all part of the same umbrella, but they also have their own worlds, their own families, and sometimes they don't even like speak to each other. Where it's like, no, that Mickey basically doesn't exist here, something like that. But I see a lot of that in Donkey Kong Country when you bring that stuff up. So that analogy of like Mickey Mouse versus Donald Duck is something that's come up quite a bit when comparing Super Mario and Donkey Kong, where Super Mario is Mickey Mouse and Donkey Kong is the Duck lore, the Duck universe. And of course, like the Duck universe has its own spin-offs and like tangents, and like that's Donkey Kong and the Rare side of things, Banjo-Kazooie, you know, like, and that makes sense. Or it's like Mario is Superman and Donkey Kong is Batman. You know, they team up, they fight each other, but also, you know,
Batman's got his own thing going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, best decision Rare made. And now, like, look, Donkey Kong is, like, equal with Mario at Super Nintendo World. You got Super Mario Land and you've got Donkey Kong Country, separate parts of the park. And yeah, like, I think you wouldn't have had this enduring resilience of this series, of this idea through all the hardships and setbacks that it's received over the years, had they not made this early decision to, you know what, keep all that Mario stuff out of here. It might have been more expedient to just lean into it and not really try to build it as its own thing. But the fact that they did not only paid off for the series, it paid off for Rare too. I mean, I'm sitting here in 2024 still talking about Sea of Thieves as it relates to the DKU.
Mm-hmm. Like, my goodness.
Yeah.
I didn't think in 2014 when I was hearing you guys talk about Donkey Kong Country for the 20th anniversary, like, look at where we are now, you know? Look at that.
Checking in with the live stream, Tomo621 says, I'm so happy DKC and DKC2 are in Nintendo Music. And we know DKC3 is coming. They advertise it as such, I think, on the Japanese trailer for the Nintendo Music app. So that's something to look forward to. And Meme Up, it says, I sense a good YouTube video, Hyle's Hidden Treasures, referring to all of my childhood junk that I had to grab. Here's the thing, though. If I find anything cool, I'll probably share it, but it's probably all, like, weather damage stuff. Not weather damage, but, like, a lot of it was kept in the basement where the humidity was just stanky and it just covered with dust and probably mold. And anything that was worth keeping, I took with me when I moved out, and that includes my DKU game collection, my original Donkey Kong Country cartridge. I popped it off the shelf the other day just to examine it. Still in great shape. Still looks as new as it was 30 years ago. I gave it a little kiss, but not too hard, because, you know, I don't want my saliva to dissolve any of it.
Of course, I do the same.
And Chris says, let's not be cruel to Shy Guys. I love those little morons. I like Shy Guys too, Chris. I love Super Mario Brothers 2. I did a whole episode about Super Mario Brothers 2 and why it appeals to the Donkey Kong Country fan earlier this year. Out of the entire Mario baddie pantheon, I think Shy Guys are my favorite. But Shy Guys would absolutely drag Donkey Kong down a few notches were they the antagonist of Donkey Kong Country. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Thank goodness Donkey Kong has his own rogues gallery. But I want to wrap things up, really, and reflect on how far we've come for this 30th anniversary of Donkey Kong Country. Because if there's any grand summation that could be had, I realize anniversaries, it's kind of a tiring thing, right? And I've been doing this podcast for 12 years now. I get it. Every iteration of 5, it's the 45th anniversary.
57th anniversary of this tree in my front yard. I don't know.
What really wears thin, it's like you see on social media, today is the 17th anniversary. I was like, who cares? Who cares?
Yeah, just get out of here, please. Save it for increments of 5 or 0.
Yeah, and I feel like 30 is a big deal for the first game in the Donkey Kong Country series because it marks 3 decades of all of this, of everything that came after. And I feel like the 30th anniversary of Donkey Kong Country is also more special than the 20th anniversary was because of how far we've come in the last 10 years from the backlash to Donkey Kong Country. And we talked about this a little bit earlier in the episode. Now, the backlash to Donkey Kong Country was this huge cultural phenomenon. It was basically the king of kids video game media in 1994. But maybe around the late 1990s, early 2000s, at least online, you started to see a little bit of pushback towards Donkey Kong Country. And it's really hard to pinpoint where it began, but I really think it's when fans started congregating on places like the official Nintendo message boards or like early video game websites like DK Vine. I think 1999, it felt like we were Johnny Come Latelys, but now in retrospect, we were on one of the early internet websites. But Nintendo and Rare fandom, I think, started to become more defined around that time, where people who are really into the Rare side of things, like, we were Nintendo kids, basically. We wouldn't be playing all these Rare games if we didn't have Nintendo consoles. But the ones who really got into Rare, we were all about the Rare side of things, even more so than Nintendo in a lot of cases. And Nintendo fandom, they really started, like, lionizing the cult of Miyamoto. And, like, Miyamoto's design philosophies. And people barely knew who Greg Mayles was then, right? It was just like Rare was this amorphous blob who was responsible from everything from Donkey Kong Country to GoldenEye, right?
Yeah.
But there started to be these divisions and little snipping back and forth. Like, I think you got a lot of these early think pieces by these Gen Xers who really, like, weren't part of the Donkey Kong Country mania when it came out, and they didn't necessarily have the same affinity and affection for Donkey Kong Country that some of the younger gamers had. And so you started, like, seeing these direct comparisons to Donkey Kong Country versus Super Mario World or Super Mario Brothers 3, and why, like, Super Mario Brothers 3 is just sterling top-tier game design, and look how flawed Donkey Kong Country is in comparison. Is Donkey Kong Country just all flash and no substance? And, of course, like, any chance that this burgeoning fire would have been doused before it became an inferno was made impossible once the buyout happened in 2002. The buyout really created this stark division where this general consensus by all of the big video game magazines and websites of the day was that Donkey Kong Country was overrated. In fact, everything Rare had done, sans GoldenEye and maybe Perfect Dark, was overrated. And I don't think any series, though, got the brunt of it like Donkey Kong Country did. And
yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
Like, I was just gonna say, like, if you really want to get mad at stuff, there was a episode of G4's Icons back in the day where they talk about Donkey Kong, and half of the episode is just them talking about how Donkey Kong Country wasn't all that. And I'm not an angry guy, but it made me almost steaming where I was like talking back to people from 2004 and wondering where their mothers went wrong with them.
Right. Like, the 10th anniversary of Donkey Kong Country was basically the low point for discussion about Donkey Kong Country, because you have this this real editorial push towards denigrating the Donkey Kong Country trilogy. And, like, you had the original DKC fans and the ones who maybe discovered it through their siblings or, like, hand-me-down systems, or they discovered it via the GBA remakes. And so it did have its fans still, but we felt like we were outnumbered. At least we didn't have the megaphone, right? We weren't controlling the broader discourse when it came to Donkey Kong Country. And so you did have this, like, poisoned well at this time, and so many people were drinking from it. So many people who weren't around for the original Donkey Kong Country mania were just led to believe that Donkey Kong Country is trash, that people just loved it for the graphics at the time, and oh yeah, the graphics have aged poorly. So there's no wonder that we at DK Vine were so defensive and so peevish when it came to defending Donkey Kong Country, you know? And
Mhm.
you talk about G4, you talk about your IGNs, your Game Informers. What really hurt was it seeping into official Nintendo publications, like Nintendo Power, where in Nintendo Power, it was the mid-aughts, and somebody wrote in a letter like, I would really love a new Donkey Kong Country game. That would be great. And the response was, yeah, no, it really wouldn't. What we would really want is a new entry in the Donkey Kong arcade series. And this was coming from Nintendo
I'm so
Power.
glad I didn't grow up during that area. I'm so glad I didn't see that stuff growing up.
Yeah, and so it really just made it hard to be passionate about this online. Of course, we had our own message board, we had our own fandom, but we were very, very just defensive, and it really just further exasperated this Rare versus Nintendo philosophy. It's like, yeah, you know what? Screw you, Nintendo. Because it really felt like
you ever do for us.
It made it feel like you couldn't be a fan of one or the other. And yeah, it sucked. Man, that whole era just felt miserable. But then the millennials who grew up with Donkey Kong Country got into more prominent positions within game media and the industry itself. And I feel like in the last 10 years alone, Donkey Kong Country's reputation has been rightfully restored. Like, every so often, you'll get some wise ass who will creep out of the shadows and try to, relitigate these arguments from 20 years prior, or even 10 years prior. I mean, it's only 11 and a half years removed from Kotaku's infamous headline, Retro's next game is another damn Donkey Kong Country.
That's when I learned not to trust Kotaku.
The backlash to Tropical Freeze seems unthinkable nowadays. Tropical Freeze is widely held as one of the best modern platformers, 2D platformers. And people forget that took a couple of years for people to come around on. At the time, it was just like, oh, fuck Donkey Kong Country. Another one. We just got one 4 years ago. Why are we getting this? This sucks. But
what a time to be alive.
Yeah, I would say in the last 10 years, in time for its 30th anniversary, I think Donkey Kong Country's reputation is right back to where it was in 1994. And let's look at the numbers really quick.
Okay.
With 2023, Donkey Kong was within the top 5 fastest growing video game brands that year. And this was large part due to the Super Mario Brothers movie and the inertia that was created from kids discovering Donkey Kong and Cranky Kong and that. But it still worked. Those 5 fastest growing video game franchises, by the way, Super Mario, The Last of Us, Twisted Metal, Gran Turismo. Well, this is all because media adaptations, right?
Oh, right. TV show or something.
Anthony Mackie, yeah. And Donkey Kong. The theme park, and I feel like the theme park has taken so many people by surprise. Of course, not anybody who's within, regular listenership of the conversation, of course. You've known the theme park's been coming for 7 years now. But
yeah,
I think even the Nintendo Direct last week took people by surprise. They're like, wait, Donkey Kong has a whole expansion coming to Super Nintendo World? What?
Imagine that, just not knowing until that dropped. That's wild.
And we talked about the Nintendo Music app and just the prominence of Donkey Kong in that. But like I said, Nintendo even acknowledged Donkey Kong Country's 30th anniversary on social media this week. You've seen this embrace of Donkey Kong Country that hasn't happened ever since the buyout, honestly. Yes, they promoted the Donkey Kong Country Returns when it came out, or Tropical Freeze when it came out. But this embrace of the whole history of the franchise it always felt like it was kind of this arm's length thing, like, it's not really us. And now it really just like, yeah, this is part of our history. And they're celebrating in a way they usually only celebrate things like Kirby or Fire Emblem or Mario or Zelda. Pokemon, yeah. And it feels like it did in the 90s when so much of Nintendo's identity was Donkey Kong Country.
Beautiful. What else can I say? It's so great to see. It's like, welcome back, friend.
And I know to a lot of people, none of this will be real. None of this will matter until we get news on the new Donkey Kong video game. Because it has been nearly 11 years since the last new standalone Donkey Kong video game. I get it. Like, to a lot of people, that's all that matters. And until we get there, all this stuff is just ephemeral. None of it is real. Right? And I would argue that that's extremely tunnel visioned. Because the theme park is the biggest fucking deal. I think, personally speaking, like, I know that seems remote to people. If you can't go to Osaka or Orlando, like, okay, that's going to be something cool for other people, but not you. It's not something you can bring into your home. It's not something you can experience on your Nintendo Switch or the Switch 2. I get that. I understand that completely. But what the Donkey Kong theme park shows is exactly what we've been saying since, 2018 here on the Kongversation. It's that Nintendo is invested in building the Donkey Kong brand again. And the Donkey Kong brand is Donkey Kong Country. No disrespect meant for the arcade era. Clearly they're still going to acknowledge and celebrate that, but I think the way they do that going forward, we saw in the Nintendo Direct, is, you have little homages to it, like that mural in the Golden Temple, but it's not.
The Pikmin's about to get crushed to heck.
Right. But there's not going to be DK's Girder Grapple Land, like that in Nintendo Land, for the Wii U. That was the big Donkey Kong attraction in that fictional theme park, right? But in the real theme park, we're getting Donkey Kong Country. That is the brand now. That is Donkey Kong. And yeah, by all metrics, other than it's been so long since we've gotten a new video game, and we've documented why it's been so long since we've gotten a video game. So, just relax, people. We're going to get a new video game. But by all other metrics, we have finally made it. It's been 30 years since Donkey Kong Country's release. It's been 28 years since the end of that initial Donkey Kong Country mania and the Kong's position as kind of the de facto leading mascots of Nintendo, when Mario's like, here's Super Mario 64. All right, Donkey Kong. Thanks for keeping the seat warm for me. I'll take it from here.
Lol, later.
It's been 22 years since the Rare buyout and all of the fandom wars that resulted. It's been 14 years since Donkey Kong Country Returns brought the concept of the series back to prominence. It's nearly 11 years since Tropical Freeze restored more of the cast, like Dixie and Funky. It's been 6 years since King K. Rool was revived by fan demand, mind you, for the Smash Ballad and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And it's been a week and a half after the first ever Donkey Kong themed Nintendo Direct. My point being, it has been such a long road back from perdition for us. It's been a weird and wild 30 years that I don't think any other fandom could really appreciate. Like Pokemon fans, I love you. All due respect, you've had it pretty sweet. I hear you griping at each other. Oh, well, Gen 1 fans are just so stuck up and entitled. Oh, what about Gen 6 or whatever? I don't fucking... You know what? You've had it...
I've been there.
Yeah, but you have it pretty good. You've had this unbroken streak of dominance where the future of your series was never in question. You've had a litany of releases. Yeah, not everything is to your taste, not everything's to your liking. My point being, you've never had to defend the very existence of your fandom, of your series, like we've had. And that's such a fall from grace from where we were 30 years ago when Donkey Kong Country was the hottest video game around. And now, on this 30th anniversary, here we are, once again, finally back on top.
Feels good, don't it?
I mean, a shame about the rest of the world, though.
Oh, yeah. Those guys.
This has been a File 2 production.
Que rico.